Okay. Thanks everyone for coming to the first webinar series. My name is Chen Peng Li. I'm the assistant professor at National University of Singapore and sociologist. And so I was told that the working language for today will be Chinese. So that's only when I speak to the panelists I will speak English. But for the most of time, because we are addressing to the audience and many from China and the Chinese Foundation and also academic. So I will use Chinese as a working language. So okay, so let's begin the kick off the first webinar series on the new power. So I would like to 我就一开始就要先介绍，就是让乐平的Jeff 沈东曙先生来先介绍一下这个乐平基金会，还有整个乐平还有这个 WINS 的这个 webinar series and collaboration。东曙。
大家好。So I think it's my turn to speak in Chinese, make it not noisy. OK， 大家好。那乐平基金会呢是一个非常注重于通过公益经济和这个社会创新的推动来推动整个中国变成一个更好的包容性发展社会的这样一个组织。我们希望能够成为这个 stake-driven economy， 也就公益经济和社会创新在中国重要的一个先行者和探索者。那么 New Power 这个议题，也就是说新浪潮、新的力量，这是我们特别推动这个社会创新和公益经济的一个关键的一个议题。我们也非常高兴呢，在去年11月份，我们请了这个在怎么通过这个 New Power 来推动社会运动方面的2位重要的这个作者然后Jeremy 和 Henry 来这个每年1度的这个斯坦福社会创新评论中国峰会上面来做演讲。也非常高兴今天能够和这个各位一起呢来进行这个新的这个 The World is Our Lab 这样的一个webinar 的一个新的系列。我今天就讲一个新的一个观点就是可能跟大家分享。只要花1分钟时间。很简单的说呢，我觉得其实是想从最近的这个中美关系可以说就是所谓的这个 rising power 这些新兴的市场，这些新兴国家，他们和过去的这个所谓的 old power， 他们之间这种竞争、合作和对抗的关系下面，我们怎么来认知我们现在的全球社会创新合作？但我觉得全球社会创新呢是在提供一种新的解决方向。这种解决方向呢，我是想说明一点，就是说对外的开放和这个合作是非常非常重要的，互相的交流是非常重要的。因为我猜想这个世界在未来20年很可能会形成一种新的态势。这种态势是什么呢？就是大家都需要英语考试但是呢有托福的考试，有雅思的考试。如果所有的国家只承认托福考试，那雅思考试就没有意义了。但是如果所有的国家都承认英语很重要，而且需要标准，需要考试，但是呢这边定的这个雅思的成绩那边定的这个托福成绩互相是可以互认的。大学同时接受雅思的成绩，也接受托福的成绩。我想呢，这样一种情况下，这个 New Power 和 Old Power 之间的很多冲突就可以避免。大家可以看一看到底是哪种考试参加人更多，是愿意考雅思的人更多，愿意接受雅思的标准大学更多，还是愿意接受托福的人更多？我个人认为这是一个非常重要的事情。在目前的这个世界情况下面，让大家接受一种考试制度大概是行不通的。在这个 philanthropy 或者在慈善公益领域，让大家只接受一种发展理论也是行不通的。但是我们需要一个开放的心态去接受多种的考试的办法。所以我觉得我们在这样的一个情况下，接受多种的考试，承认多种考试的合理性多种制度的合理性，然后呢能够互相能够接受各种考试的这个标准方法可以不同，但是对这个考试成绩大家都可以作为一种录取成绩的参考，是非常重要的一种向前发展的那个新思想。那么我们希望这个 The World is Our Lab 这个序列呢，能够为这样一种新的考试制度的探索提供一些 非常好的佐证。我今天的嘉宾会带来非常多的案例，非常多的案例后面他们的方法论和思想。我们希望这样的一个会议呢，能有助于大家互相的理解和形成新的一些合作。非常感谢大家，谢谢。
I think you're on mute again.
Yeah. Always forget to unmute myself. Yeah, sorry about it. Thanks Jeff for sharing. And 我们下一个要请那个 we'll invite Benjamin Bellagi. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. Okay, Bellagi. Yeah. Okay. So I will invite Benjamin for sharing about the role of the WINS and play a very important role in connecting the different world. Right. I think that the WINS has play a very important role in connecting different sectors and especially bring the social innovation to the traditional philanthropy field. So Benjamin, could you share a little bit on the role of the WINS and also to our audience?
So I believe that Benjamin is having internet issues. Benjamin, are you there or no?
So maybe Lauren, you want to share?
No. Yes, I can share. I can be the default Benjamin, which I've done it many times in my life anyway. So not as good looking as him, but here we are. So I'm Lauren Bradford. I'm a consultant, but I work with WINS to support their programming, and I've worked with WINS as a partner in my previous roles as well in other organizations. And so just very quickly, for those of you who don't know WINS is a community of thought leaders, change makers, and represents organizations that essentially support philanthropy to be more effective and to support people who are committed to ensuring philanthropy reaches its fullest potential as a catalyst for social progress. So WINS acts as a membership organization. Its members are made up of philanthropy support organizations, academia, and the like, and they work to bring together the sector to have conversations like this so that we can all be stronger together. So I'm sorry that Benjamin couldn't join us. Hopefully he can join at some point. And I'll hand it back to you, Professor Lee.
Okay, so thanks, Lauren, for sharing on behalf of Benjamin. And okay, so I think 我们今天要讨论的，就像刚刚 Jeff 讲的一样，是有关于这个World is our lab， 就世界是我们的实验室。然后就是今天特别有一个主题是叫做 New Power。那我想大家都会听到这个 Power， 或者说 New Power。然后就像我是一个社会学家，就会特别的对这个 New Power 到底代表的是什么意思，就会觉得我们知道什么是 All Power， 那个 Power 代表了很多东西，比如说可能是军队。可能是那个，就是说，是 money， 可能是 capital， 可能是资本。但是呢，什么是 new power？ 那我想今天有很多的这个，就像刚刚 Jeff 讲的一样，还有刚刚 Lauren 提到的，有很多的嘉宾在各个领域都不同的方向都在朝着这个一个所谓的一个 common goal、common good， 一个就是说一个让公益的方向发展，为了这个人类更好的、更美好的生活，为了一个这个世界更好的一个发展在努力。所以呢，今天要谈论的一个题目叫做 New Power。那其实我被提醒就是说，因为being a scholar， 就是说我对这个 New Power I can speak for an hour or 2 hours or for a lecture, but that I will refrain for speaking too much. 我会尽量避免讲太多。然后呢，我现在就是特别要提的是，这一次的这个 webinar series 是除了是乐平还有 WINS 以外呢，那我们过去跟乐平在很多方面有合作，所以这整个 webinar series 是一个长期的，而不是一个one time shot 这样。所以这除了是乐平公益基金会，那背后还包括乐见工作室。那个斯坦福社会创新评论中文版，就 CSSIR Chinese version of the Stanford Social Innovation Review， 还有 WINS 联合主办。然后我们这背后还有一个，就是说有一个 East Asia Social Innovation Initiative。That's the collaborative network try to connect, the scholar to promote the social innovation study, to promote 就是去鼓励更多的像年轻人，就是说在不同阶段的学者，或者说可以去把他们跟不同的这个实践者可以连接在一起。那这次先贤研讨会，我们想第一个接下来就是我们有一个 keynote speech。 是by Asha Curran。那 Asha 是这个是世界上非常有名的一个 Giving Tuesday 的一个发起人。那 Giving Tuesday 可能大家国内的各位也有听过，就是说这是在固定的一天，然后在promote这个 generosity， 就是在鼓励这种这个大家能够多的去除了捐献以外，能够在那一天能够去除了捐献以外，能够做更多的志愿者工作。那这 Giving Tuesday 从一个非常小的一个组织开始发展，那现在已经扩展到全世界一个非常大的网络。但它背后，在我跟Asha访问的时候呢，就是说它背后代表的像刚刚 Jeff 说的方法论，其实是非常有趣的。它不是靠一个非常有力的团体或是一个非常有力的个人在背后推动，而是靠它一个非常有趣的一个去中心化的这样子一个模式，还有在世界各地这样子培养不同的这个志愿者。所以那我们现在就先来看15分钟这个 Asha 的keynote speech。All right. Model, Asha, could you kind of elaborate what the new power model mean to you, and could you explain that for people who are not familiar with the new power, what implication they can get from the new power model, and how will this kind of new power model help them either to if they have something really kind of good idea, and how this new power model can help them to kind of initiate the organization or any kind of campaign.
Yeah. So the new power model is not just one thing, right? Many things have a new power model. Many of the movements that we see around us, which are having such tremendous impact, have new power models in the sense that they have new power characteristics and values, right? So they are about upload versus download. They're about things that are made by many, that are made by the crowd. They're about collection of crowd wisdom and making changes and formations based on that wisdom rather than always a top-down assessment. So the way that we think about traditional institutions and structures are really still what we think of when we think of old power, right? So power that is shaped like a pyramid, power that is very hierarchical, power that is command and control, that is very secretive, versus power that is very peer-driven, very transparent, very community-based, very open. When you talk about old power values, you think about formal governance, about institutionalism, about professionalism and specialization, right? Versus radical transparency, radical collaboration and trust, informal governance. So when we think about our particular model of movement, which is Giving Tuesday, which started out as a day to give following Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and is now a global generosity movement. And deeper than that is really a global ecosystem of grassroots leaders. What we think of is our manifestation of the new power model is what we call the nucleus model. Mm-hmm. And in our new power model, the way that that works is that our organization, which is actually a nonprofit, a smallish nonprofit, we have about 25 people. We sort of sit at the center.
Like a global movement. Wow.
Exactly. And that the reason that that works is because we are constantly pushing more power and agency to the people who engage with the movement, rather than feeling that we have to make all the decisions and have all the control ourselves. And that's why it works so well, because it was really founded on this idea of co-ownership. And co-ownership is a really new power concept. Right? When you think about traditional brands, whether nonprofit or private sector or governmental, when you think about any kind of formal institution, you certainly don't think about co-ownership. You just think about ownership, right? I own this brand, I own this company, I own the name, I own the logo, I own the mission. We don't think about it like that at all. We think about, here's this wonderful idea, which is the concept that we all want to work together toward a more generous world. But that looks different, that work day to day looks different in China and in Kenya and in Brazil and in Canada. And that the people who live in those communities know best what generosity should look like in those communities. So that is all in their hands. At the same time, there's a unified vision, this vision of a more generous world that we all work collectively together toward. And really any movement is like that, right? It shares a big, radical, overarching vision.
Yes.
The difference is that in many movements, what you have is many, many, many decentralized actors, right, who are working on their own toward that larger mission. Our model is a little bit different in that it does have a central hub and lots of connections to its other nodes. And those nodes might be other countries, local communities. They might be grassroots activists or organizers working on a huge range of social justice issues, but they're all part of the same ecosystem of leadership, right? So we are all in touch with each other all the time. We exist to support one another, to make each other's work better, to address the same shared challenges, data, scarcity mindset, lack of innovation, lack of collaboration. Everyone is addressing those same issues, and we are simply stronger if we address them together.
Yes.
And that's a very new power mindset, right? It's not, I know best how to address them and I want to tell the rest of the world how to do it, but rather, as this conference is called, the world is my lab, right? And that we are all here experimenting together, learning from each other and wanting each other to succeed. Now, unfortunately, that's not always the mindset in the social sector. Really, anywhere in the world, there is a level of scarcity mindset and a level of competition that we are trying really hard in our movement to override.
And Asha, that's a very one interesting question you mentioned, right? Because I think that right now we have a better idea, what you mean by the new model, and it's related to the the kind of success of Giving Tuesday, right? But you mentioned data, and I think that's it's also quite also quite new even to me, right? It's like what do you mean by data here? And you also mentioned data common, right? It's what's that? Could you describe a little bit more on this dimension?
Sure.
It's quite relevant to the so-called new power, right?
It's very relevant. Very relevant.
In the so-called all power, I'm a sociology, right? From bureaucratic theory, right? The bureaucracy or the hierarchical organization is always linked to the image of the all power, right? They concentrate resource and they hide the information. They kind of put all the information data in my hand and don't reveal this, don't disclose this to people, right? And so and you mentioned data, and could you describe a little bit more on this one?
Exactly what you're describing is also true of the social impact sector, that the tendency is to want to keep it as hidden as possible.
Yes.
The irony of that is that the corporate world has known for a long time that if you share data to be analyzed and pooled together, collective data, and returned to everyone's ownership, you'll make more money, right? The corporate world understands this. And we as the social
money, right? That's what we learn right now.
It's about profit, right? If you make more profit by sharing your data, you're going to share your data. That's the calculus in the private sector. It's very easy. But in our sector, we have long hoarded our data. And that means that we all only have our own data, and that it only does us any good. And it doesn't even do us that much good, right? Because we're not seeing the full picture. We're only seeing the picture of our little piece of the world, right? Or the sector.
And so that's I think that Giving Tuesday is almost 10 years, right? Right
Yes.
now. I think it's 9 or 8 years, right? So
next year, our 10th year.
Do you really see like the changing pattern of people's generosity, or like for example in the US, do you see like fundamental change? And otherwise, how will you explain this kind of the huge increase of the like donation in the Giving Tuesday that day, or kind of this kind of campaign?
I see changes based on Giving Tuesday all over the world. Really fundamental behavior changes, and increased donations is a big thing, but it's far from the only big change that I see. At the same time, I think the new power model of Giving Tuesday is so powerful because the potential for growth is still so big. So growing from 0 to 75 countries in 10 years, growing from 0 to $2.5 billion in 10 years is exponential growth.
Yeah.
Right. That's really like exponential double-digit growth every year.
What does this number mean to us, right? It's almost unimaginable, right? It's how
it is, yeah. And yet there are
now like a church and send missionary to this country, right? Because you are like still a small organization, so you don't have thousands or hundreds of missionaries you will send to this country. So it's really wonderful. It's totally different from the past, this kind of the old model, a central organization and send their missionary to different countries to set up the branch or something like that. Right?
It's exactly the opposite of that, actually, right? Because I have this nonprofit that has a staff of 25, right? But we have 600 leaders around the world who are implementing Giving Tuesday in their own local communities or entire countries. That's what makes it so powerful. Why are they willing to do that work?
Yeah.
Because of co-ownership. They're not doing our work, right? They're doing their work. They own their piece of Giving Tuesday. That's where new power models get scary for people, because the concept of co-ownership may be nice to think about, right? But really think about what that concept means in practice. It means not hoarding power, data, tools, resources. It means giving them away. It means losing some control. It means letting people take your idea and change it, right? Giving Tuesday looks completely different in different parts of the world. Even the logo changes to reflect the local places that it exists. In India, they do
people
a different day.
Outside the US to change the logo of the Giving Tuesday. They have this kind of flexibility to do this.
Well, it's so beautiful, really, because yes, it changes radically in different places in the world, and yet it does have this very powerful unifying mission.
What do you see the future of the philanthropy and giving this very powerful, kind of new model, and with data, with the co-ownership, and how do you see this, the future?
Well, it's a big question right now, isn't it? I think philanthropy is a perfect example of a sector that has an old power side and a new power side. And the two things are going to have to learn to work together toward what we all want, right? Which is a better and more equitable world. Yes. Old power philanthropy is the kind that is still operating in a very top-down command and control. We know what's best. We know what works. We decide where the currency goes because we've already made those decisions, right? It is fairly inequitable in terms of the diversity of power, the distribution of power, right? It still looks very old power. I think you probably know what I mean. Yes. And then there's things like Giving Tuesday, right? Giving Tuesday is the democratization of philanthropy. It is many, many people who are not sitting in big foundations, who are not holding wallets full of millions of dollars, taking power into their own hands, the power of philanthropy. Yeah. The power of philanthropy is the power to give an asset and realize you can make an impact. Yeah. That's all it is, right? That asset can be $2 billion. Yeah. That asset can be a grant from a big foundation. That asset can be a meal that one person cooks for another person, right? That's all philanthropy is. And the more people realize that they have the power to be philanthropists, the more they're going to challenge that old school, old power model of philanthropy in saying, wait, why don't I have as much of a voice in how changes get made in this world as you do? Because I'm just a person and you're a big institution. So I think the future of philanthropy for the short term is really wrestling with that truth. Yes. Philanthropy can't just say anymore, we want things to operate the same way that they always have, because it just doesn't work that way, right? The crowds are knocking at the door and saying, we realize now how much power we have and we intend to use it. And what are you going to do about that? There's also, certainly in the United States right now, there's a big conversation about equity and about the support and uplifting of non-traditional forms of leaders, right? Leaders just like Giving Tuesday's leaders, who are very deeply embedded in their community, right? So again, it's a new power concept that a person in a community knows what that community needs better than a faraway institution who's read a white paper and decided what is best for that community.
Washington, city, right. Very larger, the later
and much of much of international development, right? Writing a check, right? Much of international development is still based on that old model, right? We have decided what intervention works. We want to see that intervention replicated in all of these places, and that's what we'll fund. And that's very different. And now philanthropy is saying, okay, we now recognize that in order to achieve real equity within the social sector, we need to recognize the power of local leadership. Is that really going to happen? Because placing real philanthropic power and support in the hands of those local leaders is just a different model than is what is happening right now. So I think that the big question is, can philanthropy make that journey?
Okay, thanks, Sasha. I think 我想这个访问的时候是在大概是我大概差不多10点快要睡觉的时候，所以整个看起来好像状态有点奇怪。So next time I will learn better to to interview people. Okay, it sounds strange to look at my self as interviewing people on the screen. Okay, 那接下来我们就是现在跟就是说跟国内的朋友说一下这个 Giving Tuesday 大概一些脉络，就是说除我刚刚讲以外 ，Giving Tuesday 现在是一个非常大的一个 global 的这个 generosity 的 movement， 就是说在鼓励大家在美国这个 Black Friday 之后的所谓的这个 Cyber Monday， 就是一个大家集体消费之后呢，在星期二的时候，这 Giving Tuesday 的组织就是说，希望大家在这个感恩节消费完以后呢，能够也顺手的能够来做捐献或者说捐款的活动，有一点点像是就是在国内的像是像是说像那个淘宝或者说像是那个腾讯举办的那个99公益日这样子类型的活动，但是这 Giving Tuesday 大家刚可能有听到那个翻译，就是说它在短短的10年间，从一个非常小的一个这样子每年可能就是几万块的这个 donation， 成长到现在是一个全球性的一个这个 movement。然后在去年的时候，根据 Asha 跟我说的是说，整个全球的这个总额已经达到了27亿美金，就是 $2.7 billion。那这是一个非常惊人的一个成就。那他这个总结大概就是说，这个除了是一个他们的总结，不是靠一个非常庞大的组织在这个监控每一个这个所有的这个 donation 的细节，而是说靠这个全世界各地不同的组织在这个 promote 这个 Giving Tuesday 的这样子的一个活动。那所以这个是他就是现在就是说这个 Asha 所谓的这样子一个 New Power 的新力量的一个这样子一个模式。那我们现在就要邀请我们今天在这个 Panel One 的这个3位 panelists 来分享他们的经验，还有分享他们从不同的领域的就是对于刚刚听到这个 New Power 的一些这个心得分享，还有根据他们在这个不同领域里面能够来跟我们大家来谈谈，就是说他们对未来整个这个包括philanthropy，包括这个 technology 技术方面所带来的impact。那我第一个想要请那个 Jinlin，就是说这个 question 想要问你的是说 What are the upsides and downside brought by new power？ 然后还有 for example will the use of digital tools decrease the personal ties？Made through face-to-face interaction。那我先跟大家介绍一下 Jinlin 是非常有趣的经验。那大家等一下听了会觉得这个真的太有趣了。他现在是 AI 的创办，是一间 AI 公司的创办人。那除了 AI 以外呢，他之前就是在硅谷，还有在包括国内、香港各个科技公司都有服务，都有工作过，都是高管。然后呢，也一直在思索，包括像机械人，还有像那个人工智能跟这个整个这个社会这个发展的关系。那我们想请 Jinlin 来分享一下，大概差不多3到5分钟，这个关于刚刚你这样子听完整个 New Power， 还有关于就是说你可能现在也在对那个 philanthropy 有一些开始介入有一些思考。那可不可以请你跟大家分享一下你的看法
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Sorry, my Chinese is not excellent, so I'm going to stick to English. So really glad to be here. So when I looked at the webinar, the topic New Power, I was really interested in looking at that from multiple aspects. So I guess the first one is the power of innovation. So that's the one thing that has really accelerated with the pandemic, because things that were projected to happen in 4 years actually happened within half a year. You know, companies were in a big hurry to invest in infrastructure so that they could actually enable their staff to work from home. And also schools were in a hurry to actually enable their students to learn from home. So there is a really great benefit in having the digital transformation accelerated, because it's just a matter of time. So one thing that I think is really an upside of all this is the democratization of information. So, you know, whereas before you have, for example, you have events, you know, always maybe inviting the C-level, those kind of events, and then paying a few $1,000s. Now you have all the events having to find a new business model by providing the events for free, and then inviting people from all over the world. And so you have the event being accessible to many, many more people than before. And so whilst a lot of people saying they don't like virtual events, it's not the same. Actually now I think it's a good thing, because it's allowing a lot of people to attend events that they would never have attended. And actually the events have much greater diversity, because now a lot of events are global. They could involve many people around the world. So the other thing is user-generated contents. So I think social media was driving that. You know, there's a lot of user-generated content, so there's a lot more diversity in perspective and so forth. But like Clubhouse, I think all of you have heard of the new app called Clubhouse. So basically, it's a you know, you just enter into a room and then you just start presenting. So it's almost like a virtual speaker's corner, right? It's democratizing free information and free speech. So anybody could start a room and be a speaker, and everybody could participate and take turns in speaking. So I think it's creating a groundwell of a lot of information. But there are actually a lot of downside, I think, because it really shows the gap between the have and the have-nots. Because technology, it's expensive. So I've read a lot about students who don't really come from a good family having trouble accessing virtual classes, you know, and they're at home, they're not in a very good environment to learn. So that's one thing. The other thing is at the country level too, there are countries that are investing huge amounts of money into AI. So now they're talking about this being a two-horse race between US and China. But I mean, there are so many companies that need technology, right? And so this is like basically extending the gap a lot. And the other downside is the potential job loss from AI. So Oxford forecasts that 40% of jobs would be lost or would be transformed in the next 10 to 15 years. So a lot of these social aspects, you know, there isn't really a very good answer right now to address them. We're kind of kicking the can down the line, and hopefully, you know, somebody would find a way to address it. Yeah, so, and then I guess the last one I want to talk about is disinformation. And this is becoming a really big problem, and it's going to be a much bigger problem with social media fake news. So they estimate that fake news actually are 6 times more viral. So, you know, people are actually sharing a lot of fake news. And the other thing is deep fake videos. Now, AI could generate. So, for example, Professor, your head could be on somebody else's body, and you'll be saying things that you don't know that you're saying, and people could be sharing your videos, right? It could be very scary because people will no longer know what they could believe. So this is something that is one downside, but you know, there's a lot of companies trying to address this issue right now.
Thanks, Jun. Next, we will want to invite like Osana or Harshava. I hope that I pronounced your name correctly. So that Ohana, that could you speak?
Thank you for invitation to such an interesting seminar on a new power. The topic is really of interest for me because of my personal background. Being a political scientist, I always studied power from one perspective or another. So to see how these concepts we usually use could be implemented in our practical everyday life is quite exciting opportunity. Today I will talk on new power and technology. So that's what I was asked to see how those issues, power and technology, are interconnected, and whether we can say that new power is mainly driven by technology. To look at new power and technology, we, I think, need to start on a classical definition of what the power is. Like the easy, fine definition, the power is about ability to control something, people, events, opportunities, funding. So this is a classical definition of any power. And technology, without any doubts, influences this process. And actually technology provides a basis to change the distribution of power between different actors. That was Aisha was talking about. How we can do that through technology. If we look at funders and their role in this power paradigm, we usually associate money and funding with an opportunity to influence the project, the outcomes of the project, to be attributed to the outcomes. However, with crowdfunding opportunities we have, and crowdfunding is about technology, we actually destroy this classical paradigm of relationship between the funding opportunity and attribution to outcome. When we unite at one platform around the cause, and the cause is described, provided, explained, and we may use different words to describe this, by those who work on the ground on this particular cause. And we, the funders, agree with this NGO to support this through crowdfunding opportunities. So from this perspective, technological solutions, digital solutions give us an opportunity to change the traditional relationship. And this is part of new power we were just talking about. And Giving Tuesday is also about this opportunity in a way, because this is the same technological solution. If we look at another technological solutions related to distribution of funding, this is more complicated instrument. We have number of different technological systems to help grant seekers, let's call them grant seekers, to get additional funding. There are technological application platforms, there are grant management platforms that actually help us in our everyday life. And from this perspective, when we use application platforms as a part of open calls, we actually increase the opportunity for participation. So we give equal opportunities to everyone who is interested in this call to apply. Again, this is a redistribution. There is actually more equity and inclusion in the process, because in the past, we distribute the information not through online resources or online platforms, but through other sources, actually through distribution channels, narrowing down those who could use this opportunity in the end. So from this perspective, going online for application processes and grant management process is definitely a way for more inclusion, more equity, and more participation. The other part of this, we actually, through technology, provide equal opportunities for grantees for potential grantees who don't receive any privileges through decision-making process. So the decision-making process going online, again, equalize both actors. The power gap is narrowed in this case, but it's not held at all, because the question goes deeper. We design first those technologies, and in order to really work on the power gap, we need to go not to the technology itself, but how we design the instruments. That in the design process, we actually address the issues of changing power relationship between those who have funds, grant, and those who are looking for funds. So that's one of the challenges, I would say. And of course, technology has some limitations in this area. We already talked today about big data. Technology is almost about big data and artificial intelligence. And when we provide online opportunities for funding, we very quickly move from individual relationship, even though, let's say, okay, based on power, but individual relationship between people and organizations, into an area where we have thousands and millions, but we don't see the face. So we have a lot of big data, very interesting data. We can have this data be publicized, like providing, again, what Asha was saying, people know what is going on. But on the other hand, we are start losing very important part of this process, like the human face of what all of us are doing. We see the data. And just to make it to the extreme, if we use technology and we rely on technology, it's very easy to include humans from a relationship between funders and those who receive funding. We can have artificial intelligence to decide. But then we can come to the situation when we have cars without drivers. We have language tests that were mentioned that equalize the process, but we have, again, the other part of it. We have people who have good results, but not knowing language. They couldn't communicate in this language. The results are perfect. So the question would be for the future, how to combine benefits of technology and big data and human face of philanthropy, which we need, and how to use both parts of it in one process. The other limitation of technology would be is that when we go to true partnerships, equal partnerships and equal relations between different parties, when there is no single attribution, so when we jointly work on a common source, we see that putting this on the technological basis, we limit the opportunities for partnershiks. Because
could you, because we have time limit, could you finish?
I'm finishing, Afghan. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
We're limiting the opportunity for partnerships because, and pandemic showed that we have pluses, but the minuses are the resources we miss, like networking resources, expertise we have, and others. So I think the future is about how to use technology for the best of the new power, but still not rely on technological solutions in full. Thank you.
谢谢 Osana。刚刚忘记介绍 Osana。Osana 是 CEO 首席执行官 of the Poten Foundation， 那个俄罗斯最大的最大的一个基金会。那我们下一个我们现在时间有一点落后，那我们下一个就请那个 Claire Woodcraft。That's Claire, are you here?
Thank you, Professor Lee. Pleasure to be with you here today. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Claire 是这个现在是剑桥那个甲级商学院的这个战略慈善中心的首席执行官。那之前曾经担任过那个阿联酋的那个基金会的执行长。那 Claire, that's your turn. Claire? Go ahead. Could you hear me?
Thank you, Professor Lee. So I was
Yes.
just waiting for the translation of the introduction. Actually, my title is Executive Director of the Center for Strategic Philanthropy inside the Judge Business School. So I'm not in charge of the Judge Business School, but responsible for the dedicated Center to Strategic Philanthropy, which actually is partnering with your university and with the Lee Kuan Yew Business School on the 14th of May to run a conference on talking philanthropy in Asia. So looking forward to future collaboration. We see you as our counterpart in
It's
Asia.
Lee Kuan Yew Public Policy School. It's not B School. I think you are mentioning Public Policy School.
Yes, sorry, Public Policy School, indeed.
Yeah.
We're both getting our titles mixed up this morning. So thank you so much for inviting me today, and thank you for Wings. I think, as you said in the beginning, Professor Lee, this is a topic that in and of itself could take a whole seminar on new power, but I really like Asher's very succinct definition of what we mean by new power, talking about uploading versus downloading and this real spirit of community-based, radical transparency, informal governance. And I felt as she was describing new power, that it was almost like she had commissioned the research report that we undertook last year, which we didn't actually set out to talk about new power specifically. We set out to look at the power dynamics between the global north and the global south. But a lot of what she was defining as new power is exactly what we found on the back of our research. So the Center for Strategic Philanthropy inside the Judge Business School is focused on emerging markets. So we look at Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And last year, just as COVID hit, we decided to look at the power dynamics in philanthropy and whether COVID-19 had shifted the power dynamics in emerging markets, including Asian markets. And we started by trying to understand why we care about power. What is it about philanthropy and power that interests us? Of course, we know that in philanthropy, a sector that is perhaps still institutionalizing, still maturing, historically, we have seen power concentrated in more mature institutions, often in the global north, often extremely well resourced. And that has led to a phenomenon whereby often best practice in philanthropy, in terms of how we deploy philanthropic capital, how we measure impact, has been created within constructs that are very much coming from Western models from the global north. And indeed, as our academic director, Kamal Munir, points out, paraphrasing Foucault, who talks about the constructs of power, he says that when somebody gets to set the parameters within which you think and act, they are exercising power over you. So historically, this is how philanthropic capital has exercised power over recipients of that capital in the global south. And what has that meant in terms of manifestation? Well, we knew already, and no one will be surprised by this, that the sector of philanthropy has often been criticized. People have said the system is broken. People have said there needs to be a paradigm shift. People have said, notably on the back of COVID, things need to change radically. Why? We have seen very high levels of bureaucracy that relate to philanthropic capital being dispersed and deployed, meaning very high transaction costs for both the grant maker and the grant recipient. We have seen very restricted funding. So a lot of philanthropic capital that comes with a lot of conditionality that can't be spent on core costs, that can't be spent on building underlying infrastructure, that can't go towards salary, and often therefore limits capacity building. And we've seen that sometimes this philanthropic capital, also because of power constructs, is misaligned with local needs. So money coming into emerging markets that is being conditionally purposed for things that aren't necessarily what the local community needs. And we also have seen a level of complexity that perhaps doesn't necessarily need to be there. As Asher was pointing out, philanthropy is simply contributing to a public good. And yet we have managed to, over the decades, as we have seen the professionalization of large institutions giving philanthropic capital, we have seen a huge level of complexity whereby grant recipients often have to spend a huge amount of time and effort to access the capital. And indeed, many are prevented from accessing philanthropic capital because of the complexity of the systems. And as one of our interviewees said, Chris West, who's the founder of the Sumerian Foundation, The supply side in philanthropy doesn't operate any commercial rules. It makes the rules of the game and is disassociated from what the target market side needs, and it gets to decide who gets the money, in what form, and using what process. And therein lies the challenge, that the supply side has dominated. The constructs of power have meant that a smaller, concentrated group of institutions have defined best practice in philanthropy for a long time. Now, what COVID-19 did, in our opinion, is it started to shift the power. It started to reveal this phenomenon of new power. The gravity of the crisis, the immediacy of the needs meant that people did start to change behavior. So, for example, we saw large grant-making organizations radically change their flexibility and pragmatism, start giving unrestricted funding where perhaps they wouldn't have, dispersing capital within a matter of days, sometimes weeks, where historically it would have taken months. We saw, thanks to digitization, much better sharing of data, much more innovation, much more connectivity, whereby local communities were able to connect. They were forced quickly online. And in response to that, excuse me one second while I retrieve my headphone. In response to that, they were able to have much more engaged connection. And often in markets where historically large markets, places like Indonesia, where you have huge ground to cover around connectivity. In Africa, we saw this, where connectivity was becoming the norm, where historically face-to-face meetings would have taken perhaps a lot of resource from a logistical perspective. Here we saw connectivity supporting third sector organizations. And finally, a point that Oksana mentioned, we also saw a real recognition of the value of networks. That networks that historically we have seen radically underfunded by philanthropy because they're not easy to measure the outcomes. It's not easy to articulate what networks have delivered in terms of social impact. But during COVID, we saw the consolidation of networks in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, where people were coming together to share resources, share best practice, and develop peer-to-peer learning and solidarity. So really picking up on those points that Asha mentioned about flatter hierarchies and more community connectivity. So we put together some recommendations on the back of our research as to what we would like to see moving forward as we move beyond COVID. What are the behavioral patterns that we witnessed historically that we would like to be retained beyond COVID? And we identified three core things. So the first one, to fund these networks. So a real call to action that global grant makers look at the possibility of funding networks and not just individual grant recipients. We're also calling for greater collaboration between emerging market foundations and governments. We see that's something that happened on the back of COVID. And we're also calling for grant makers to start to much more consistently offer grant funding for core funding, unrestricted capital that can be deployed to increase capacity. And we feel that on the back of those three recommendations, if these behaviors are entrenched and pursued, we will see much greater diversity and inclusion within our sector, really giving power to a much wider range of voices, flatter hierarchies and more connected ecosystems, and stronger resilience and more dependence on local resources. And that's something that we already saw on the back of COVID. So let me stop there. That's really just our broad-based conclusions on how we are actually seeing on the back of our COVID-19 report, this concept of new power play out in emerging markets. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. 那我们现在下一个就请那个 Olivia, right? That's how 但我想这个 Olivia you can speak in Chinese. I was told that you have you can speak excellent Chinese.
Well,
okay, so
I don't know if it's excellent, but I can speak at least. 所以现在我就讲中文了。我觉得今天可能我不是以一个学者的一个身份来去讲从中国的角度的公益的一些发展。你们实际上发给我的问题，我觉得有一点广和比较复杂，所以我可能比较接地气的从我观察到的最近几年的一些趋势去讲中国的一些情况。首先，我觉得新势力或者新兴力量这些概念在中国。对我来讲，这是一个疑问，我到今天为止还没有完全想清楚 能不能把这些理念在中国的环境和中国的背景下利用，打一个问号。但是没关系，我觉得有一些新的趋势，这是毫无疑问。我今天希望能够跟你们讲一些我观察到的新趋势，我认为非常重要的一些新趋势。首先，作为一个第一点，我非常赞同你们去年底2位作者的总结的时候的一个点。他们说，我现在是念了这句话，我们不是要在传统力量或新兴力量中2选1，而是要考虑如何有机结合，寻找能够有效的平衡2者的模式。我非常赞同这一点，我也认为这一点在中国和为了公益的总体发展是非常重要。我今天要讲几个点，我观察到的点和我认为可能我们需要关注的，如果讲中国的公益发展的几个点。第一 ，participation， 参与。按照我的观察，因为我主要的观察是对全职的公益从业者，不是志愿者，这个趋势是毫无疑问。我们如果看了中国最近几十年的公益圈，的确参与的志愿者也好，参与的那些全职的公益从业者也好，那是一个不可逆的一个趋势。我就是研究的过程中，我想问给从业者的问题是：你为什么从事公益？然后他们给我回答了很多不同的原因，有时候是他们已经找不到任何的吸引力，他们希望能够在工作当中得到了其他的一些东西。第二呢，他们有时候会因为不同的原因，自己的原因、家庭原因，或者可能真的是被一个报道而感动的原因，他们我这儿是很安静，这个声音应该不是我的。也许现在可以听得清楚吗？没问题吗？
现在可以听到。
好的。所以我觉得参与是一个非常明确的一个趋势，我倒觉得这个是我们大家都认可。第二，我想讲的就是 qualification， 可能用中文翻译的话，资格、水平、能力这些词儿可能都是部分的有道理的。我采访的公益从业者当中，大部分是自我批评，说我们的圈子水平太低，我们的能力不够强，我们要继续见识我们自己的能力。我这里举几个例子，比如说一个做自闭症的公益组织，这位也非常诚实的，说他摸索了很多年，到底怎么做，哪一个思路，哪一种方法对自闭症和自闭症的家庭成员是最有利，他摸索了很久。有一些做环保的组织也跟我说，我们第1年、第2年地方政府对我们的报告很感兴趣，但是我们发现了到第3、第4年，我们到底有没有新的建议？我们有没有更容易执行的、更有建设性的建议能够提供给他们呢？我们慢慢就变成了一个走一圈再走一圈，懂一圈，好像我们没有什么突破的新想法和新的建议。所以这个都是跟资格或者能力有关系。我觉得还有很重要的一点，那么第3，那就是我叫它对不起，还是在资格方面，我觉得还有几个层面啊。这几个层面就是我到底有没有能力跟地方政府甚至中央政府的官员去沟通，因为我非常了解这个问题。我可能在国内很了解，可能在某一个地区很了解，然后我到底能够给这些人带来什么呢？给这些机构带来什么呢？我可以给不同的利益相关者带来什么呢？这个是我认为一个层面。还有，我们能不能也从官方的、从政府的角度去想，我怎么能帮你解决这问题？在费用方面现不现实？要花的钱的回报会不会比不做任何事情的回报大很多、高很多？等等，就有很多。然后公益组织，比如说和这些最重要的利益相关者，我再举政府的例子，怎么合作？怎么能有一个双赢的合作方式？另外，可不可持续，这也是另外一个层面。我有很多公益组织，我自己经历的， 做了几年，然后可能因为不同的原因做不下去。做不下去的话，无论是所谓的弱势群体，或者是其他的一些利益相关者或者政府部门，如果你无法保证你的可持续发展，我跟你合作有什么意义呢？所以这个是我包含在一个很大的一个 qualification， 就是能力资格的一个范围里头。第三，最后一点 communication， 所说的 communication 不只是这种传统的旧式的传播，我更注重的就是更关注的是一个互动和一个沟通，跟不同的利益相关者的沟通。那么这不同的利益相关者，当然首先是弱势群体，所谓的弱势群体，或者某一个地区有一个环境的问题，我们要了解对这个本地的和其他地区的受到了这个环境问题的影响的利益相关者，他们怎么想，他们需要什么呢？另外一个那个例子，我给你举一个简单的例子。对我来讲，印象非常深刻的一个公益组织，它在北京，我不说名字，但是它关注的是一个罕见病的问题，而它对这个罕见病的问题是了解到什么样的地步？一，数据，演医院的数据都没有他们这么全，因为他们已经收集这些资料10多年了。二，他们非常清晰，某某政府部门只能解决这个问题、那个问题、这个问题，等于他们不会把一个大问题带给一个政府部门说你帮我解决，而他们非常清晰知道哪一个政府部门能帮助他们在比较狭窄的范围以内去解决这问题。这3个点呢说完了，主要的目标是什么呢？说实话，用中文到底应该用能见度还是可见性？哪一个词我不是最清楚了啊 ？Visibility， 我觉得现在可能很多的公益组织在建设的过程中还要强调的一点就是倡导性的工作，因为有很多的问题，我们的确普通老百姓在国内还是不知道他们的存在，然后政府也不一定有一个很好的解决方案。那么你要把这些问题的能见度或者是可见性提高的话，你又不能太高调，你又不能太低调，你要把握一个度，而这个度还是以倡导为主这个出发点。所以呢，总结，我认为现在我们讲的新势力或者是旧势力，我走了一大圈，现在就回到了这个新势力或者旧势力。我觉得名字可能不是最重要，目前能够看到的在国内的一些趋势就是参与，这个是毫无疑问。二，能力，我认为最近5、6年已经有非常大的变化，我能碰到的越来越多的很专业的公益从业者。三，而这方面我觉得还是很不足，沟通，能够把这些问题提倡出去，让大家知道这些问题的存在，能够让政府部门意识到我们合作的话能解决这些问题。我就说到这儿，我觉得现在的确是需要合作，就是刚刚说的那句话，去年的那个总结，无论是新势力或者旧势力，合作，特别在中国是唯一能够走的一条路。
Okay, thanks 谢谢 Olivia 啊。那我们现在因为时间是有限，我们现在有一个问题，其实有好几个问题。那我们现在有一个问题是专门针对 Oksana 的，就是说有一个问了说 How can foundation in the global south tap into the generosity of this new power? Oksana, could you provide a very short answer to this, and we will conclude by asking Professor Guan to give like short remarks. Oksana, there's probably 1 or 2 sentences responding to this question.
To respond it quickly, I have that 2 things foundations can do to support new power development. First, to invest in digital transformation of individual organizations and networks, providing resources here. And second, because of not having hundreds of years background in old philanthropy, to move quickly from supporting projects that are very important to supporting organizations and people who actually work on the ground. And then we'll receive what Asha was describing, flexibility, innovation, and new power between different parties. Thank you.
Yes, Thank you so much. And I would like to 我现在想请那个关凯老师，然后关凯老师是云南大学那个社会科学院的院长，然后同时也是这个中文斯坦福社会创新评论的主要编辑之一。那可以来给个关老师，你大概可以长话短说，大概3到4分钟好吗？因为我们时间有一点稍微超过了。
好的，任邦，好的，听得见我讲话吧？
可以。
那对，几位讲演人的内容都很有吸引力哈。我只在这里强调一点哈，其实如果我们把这个当我去思考新型领导力的时候，我会放在一个更长的历史视野来看。其实就像这个小病毒把我们整个世界改变了很多一样。真正的改变都是在意想不到的地方出现。今天我们可能也仅仅是察觉到这种新型领导力产生的一个苗头或者是一个开端。因为在今天我们可以看到，不管是慈善事业还是社会重新自我组织方面，它并不是说这种互联网提供的新的连接使小人物小组织瞬间变成了巨人，其实它真正的是改变了那个连接的方式。而这个 new power 它和以前的 power 不大一样了，因为可以看到这样说，在今天用 new power 代表的哈，就是前面那个Lin讲过这个，说共同拥有的想法呀，其实在历史上是从来没有真正实现过，但是现在看到了希望，而这种是因为这种 new power 开始嵌入真实的生活世界，而不是嵌入经济和政治，这是一种不一样的东西。就是说，我觉得我们可能过去经常也在讲社会平等，而且更大的意义是在社会结构意义上来讲平等。但今天，平等在更细微的参与和行动的意义上得以实现，至少它有实现的可能性出现了。我觉得这是一个伟大的进步事业。所以我认为，我们真正的来说，今天我们要深入的思考这样的一个方式，这样的一个 new power， 它给我们带来的一切的改变。这种改变往往它不仅仅是对于公益领域，其实它对整个的社会生活都有着强烈的暗示，一种新的利益相关者共同创造的共享价值，如何能在他们内部首先得以实现，并且能够经由跨阶层的、跨地域的、跨国的，是吧？这个去把一个新的，就是引导一个新的社会在慢慢生成啊。我最后想回应一下那个Oliver在讨论那个中国的特殊性。其实我一开始讲说，如果你把时间放长了之后，这样的由于新技术带来的社会的一个新的变化，中国一定不是例外。好，振邦，我就说到这里。
好，谢谢关老师。我那个说长话短说，结果你就真的长话短说了。好，那我们现在就是非常好，那谢谢大家。就是我们这个把这个原本落后的比较多一点时间，现在在大家的努力之下，稍稍把它搬回来了。那我们现在就其实我们就可以开始我们的这个就是刚刚就是我们的这个 Panel 1就大概这样结束了。那其实我觉得这个是有一点大家有点意犹未尽，就是说其实每个人的时间都稍微有点压缩到。那其实很多东西其实每个人都可以，其实所有的 panelists 都可以讲的非常多的。那有一些我没有把各位这个所有的 panelists 介绍非常好的地方，那我想你们可以在那个就是说在乐平的网站上面都可能可以找到这些他们的这个相关讯息，还有他们就是说各个这个组织还有他们所做的事情的一些报道。那之后那个 CSSI 啊，还有那个就是说那个像我们的刚刚说的那个就是东亚这个社会创新的这个网络都会持续的在做一个追踪报道，然后还有在做一个这个连结合作，然后也欢迎就是说各位现在还在场的这个伙伴，还是说基金会的同事，甚至说是学生或是研究者，都欢迎你们能够在之后能够继续来关注我们这个活动，还有就是关注所有的这些包括不管是偏学术性的偏，或者说稍微综合的，或者说像今天 这样是一个这个以全球当做以世界为度，以世界为实验室这样子一个方向的一个 webinar 的新尝试。我们把所有在这个全世界各地做不同活动、不同尝试的，然后比较成功或甚至是失败的例子，我们都能够把它大家集结在一起，然后能够来互相学习，互相能够来连接，然后互相能够来就是砥砺。就像我们回应刚刚最开始的时候，东属 Jeff 说的，就是说我们现在是有在书上我们社会学说有 different modernity， 就是说不同的现代性。那在这个 philanthropy， 然后我们现在也看到有所谓的 old philanthropy model， 就是说旧的慈善的形式。就是说，大家都比较认同的是一种，这个是一个比较大型的一个这个 hierarchical， 然后一个是这个一个阶层式的组织。然后现在我们有一个是比较能够透过各种新技术、新力量、社群媒体不同的都可以发挥出一个都可以爆发出一个很巨大的能量，来促进这个整个对公益活动的一个整体这个容量的上升。那我们第二个 panel， 我们第一个 panel 就这样结束了，就是说我们在第一个 panel 里面我们讨论的这个力量到底是谁，然后它是什么，在哪里。就是 who what why and how。那我们现在进入第二个 panel two。panel two 的这个 title 大家可以看到，就是说这个 panel two 是所谓的这个 power to empower。这个是好像有点绕口，就是说这个英文这个 power to empower 就是听起来没有那么绕口，但这个中文翻译起来的话，就是说。去使你赋权的力量，就是说呢，有一些力量，就像刚刚关老师或者说其他的 panelist 在第一个 panelist 讲了，传统上的 power 可能是要去 repress 你，可能是要去就是说要去指引你说这个 philanthropy 慈善应该是要怎么做。但现在这个 power， 我们在这个 new power 我们可能看到是现在的 power 往往是去鼓励你，去给你一个 incentive。给你一个这个诱因，让你去做事。那怎么样能够来形成这个 power to empower， 这是一个所谓的正循环。这个很像是那个所谓永动机，就是说，当我们有了这个 power to empower 以后呢，那我们其实在上面的人就不需要的那么的费尽心思，每一个事情都要去做，而能够是说。看到每一个在不同领域的人都能够有一个这个被鼓励、被 empower， 然后 feel empower， 然后能够愿意去做事。好，那我自己就不讲太多了。那我就是说我们第二 panel two 也有三位非常精彩的，就是说这个 panelist 啊。那我现在想邀请第一位来跟我们分享的是Jenna Ma-Wei-Yu。I hope I pronounce your last name correctly. Jenna Ma-Wei-Yu. And is Jenna here?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Jenna 在这。那我先介绍一下 Jenna 的 background。那个 Jenna 是肯尼亚社区发展基金会的执行主管，然后呢，在这个基金会，在这个 non-profit 这个非营利的组织里面有了超过30年的经验，所以我想说 Jenna 可以跟我们分享这个很多这个他自己的对所谓的这个 power to empower 这个问题的一个自己的一个经验，还有一个他的分析。Jenna, your turn.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, really nice to be part of this conversation. And as I said, as you've just introduced, I represent KCDF, which is a 24-year-old community foundation in Kenya. I really enjoyed the conversation around Giving Tuesday because it kind of speaks to the things that brought about our creation, focusing on communities and finding ways of enabling them to take charge of their own development. And we've come all through over the years from a belief that everybody has something to give, that giving is not something for the rich or corporates, but actually everyone has something to give. And of course, keeping a long-term perspective and keeping communities as our main focus. With that in mind, we sort of knew that we have to be led by the issues that bother or are a big challenge to communities. And poor communities actually struggle with very basic things like education, things like health, things like, livelihood, just access for this. And within that framework, of course, the more vulnerable people, whether it's children, women, very often youth, who form a big chunk of our population, are among the most vulnerable, and so paying attention to that. And so in thinking about the topic today, power to empower, I think one of the things we realized from the beginning and continue to do so even after working all these years is that if you're not conscious about the power you have as a grant maker, which we are, it's very hard, or you're not able to be aware of how you affect people because you are not conscious of the power you wield because you have some money. Money being the kind of thing that rules a lot of the world today. And so one of the things we do, and we have continued to do over the years, is to ensure that we are inducting our staff and our frontline staff to be conscious of the fact that money can be a big hindrance in the way you interact with communities. So that consciousness helps you learn to go with humility when you want to empower people. And so growing staff skills is a continuous thing that we are always trying to do, and investing in developing stronger OD skills so that people are conscious about how they interact with others. At the same time, we've also realized over the years that very often people are affected by the things that they have experienced. So when people have indulged or been confronted by things which disempower them, they lose their self-confidence, they lose their ability to express themselves. And very often aiders, unfortunately, and some of the conversation has touched on that, very often the power people have on others has disempowered them. And so we've recognized from the beginning that investing in capacity building processes is core to being successful in empowering other people. And so investing in processes that rejuvenate, revive, revamp, reinvigorate are very core type of activities because they help people discover they have something to offer. And it's very important that we work in clever ways that help reactivate that in them, build that confidence back. So we found capacity building goes hand in hand with good development processes. It's not just going to build a school or going to build a hospital. It's actually first engaging with the people. So you grow that confidence, you help them discover what they can put on the table. You help them recognize their diversity of resources, knowledge, which they have, and then they are able to participate effectively. And building on that kind of orientation, that shapes our grant-making processes, helping communities figure out what are these things that we really need, where are we, how did we come to this point where we are not producing food? How are we contributing towards, bad management of the environment? Why are children not learning? What can we do? How can we participate? How can we join the teachers? And in many cases, we found there are very many practical ways which poor communities can contribute towards improving the environment of themselves and their families. And so we sort of then work in ways which help to build on what they have, and very often matching the kind of contributions the communities have. So very often a community that has found is struggling with classrooms, for example, maybe they don't have enough, helping them deal with that. Recently, we were involved in helping a certain secondary school build a dining room because that was a big thing that was bothering them. So again, flexibility, which I had mentioned here, being less prescriptive and more responding to the needs that are emerging. So if it is classroom, fine, how can we work together? What can you bring? In one situation near one of the leading national parks, a community, what they had were their goats and animals and sheep, and just bringing them up together, being willing to take that, helping them figure out a marketing strategy, and that in the end, we are able to value what that contribution is. And in the end, they've been able to come up with, 4 feeder schools, so their kids are safe and not being attacked by animals around there. a market center recently in another part of the country where farmers realized that what we need is to be able to market our produce, have a place where we can display well in a clean environment. And this allows us to, to sell our produce. Anybody can access here, we can negotiate here. So just that flexibility, not to be prescriptive, and you find you can leverage. And sometimes you're just doing one-to-one matches and it just does wonders. This kind of thing. We've been involved in getting libraries in place, health centers. And what we found is as the communities get more empowered, they actually improve greatly their power to negotiate. In a couple of these cases where we've been involved, we've seen them being able to bring on board the government. Sometimes they'll invite the government official to come and open the facility, like schools. Like in this case, they invited the local governor to come and open, and that gave them a window to now negotiate when it came to doing the health center. So they then are able to access more government resources because they can negotiate. They can also negotiate better with nonprofits, other nonprofits working in the area, and with different kinds of contributions, because they are able to know they have a voice. Together, they are able to be a much more powerful voice. We've seen communities leverage on the local people who work in the city, professionals, coming back and being able to mentor their young people in the local secondary schools, because they have actually realized, oh, these are also our people, we can ask them. So being on the table allows you to actually do a lot of things. And so we've realized it's so important that, that the communities gain that confidence and begin to see what are the resources around us, and of course include whatever they have. We've seen that using methods like those open doors for us. We've been involved with companies who now want to match some of those kind of efforts with communities, match the construction of a new dormitory, the construction of new secondary school classes, because they can see that when they work with an actor who understands how important it is that the communities are on the table, even their contributions are more powerful than when they go and build the school for them. Building the school does not empower. So it's not about the infrastructure. It's about working in a way that just helps the confidence get back to the people. Even during this COVID period, we've seen lots of communities being able to keep an eye on each other. We've seen a lot of engagement of companies begin to give. Initially, it was just the practical needs, food and stuff, health kind of things. But with time, more have come on board to actually help in rejuvenating livelihood type of activities. So this kind of empowerment is really a lot to do with the orientation we have, the methods we use, and recognizing that communities have a lot. We just need to learn to build on that and take what they have and now bring it on board. So very much aligned to the spirit that is behind the Giving Tuesday, which we just had. Thank you.
I think you're on mute again.
对，我想说，刚刚从 Jenna 的听里面，大家可能听众都会发现有很多这个相似性，就是说，包括像他提到农村里面，这个不是最重要的，不是关于建设所谓的 infrastructure， 不是说只有盖教室而已，而是说这关于人的这个 capacity building， 然后还有包括就是说要怎么样去寻找，就是说像是这个中国人常说的，就是说给他鱼不如教他怎么样钓鱼，就是说要让他们有 empower， 然后能够去 去找寻到这个所谓的这个 market strategy， 所谓市场策略。其实这个很多东西，大家可以发现，这个所谓这个全球就是我们的实验室，我们可以从各个地方学到这个问题。就是说中国的农业问题、农村问题，其实乐平过去也投入了非常多的心力，包括像富平农业学校这些，其实都做的事情很多都有相似性的。所以呢，我觉得这个是非常好的，就是 Jenna 的这个 sharing， 这个带来这个在肯尼亚怎么样在透过这个农村的地方，即使发展程度有稍微不同，但是大家可以发现到很大的相似性，然后可以互相彼此学习。那我们下一个要请的是Via， I hope that I pronounce your name correctly. Via Shah 然后他是 Via 是这个 Edelgift 的基金会首席执行官，同时也是这个 Edelweiss 的金融服务集团的非执行董事。那这个Via Via are you here?
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And, you know, I loved the introduction and all the panels and all the sessions that we had before. I'll just set the context because I am from India, as you can see. I run a grant-making foundation, but interestingly, it's actually a corporate foundation. It's part of the Edelweiss Group, which is a financial services group based out of Mumbai. And the foundation was actually set up as part of one of the guiding principles that the group, and I'm part of the founding team of Edelweiss. It was part of the, you know, our guiding principles to actually start giving as soon as we started making sustainable profit. So Edelweiss is 25 years old and the foundation is 13 years old. It is very interesting in the context of the conversations I've heard before, because in a sense, this company represents the new wave of entrepreneurship we saw in India post-reforms. So new wealth, but the philanthropy began in an age of old power. And in a sense, we're also at that cusp of shift that we, even in a market like India, from, you know, where philanthropy in the way it is meant to be practiced is young. In your opening notes, for example, we've spoken about China having a long history of giving in some form or fashion. And that's very similar in India as well, where there is a long history of giving. We have a Sanskrit word, daan. We've had zakat as part of our Islamic culture as well. So it's an ingrained way of life. However, the way philanthropy is now being spoken about is a relatively new phenomenon. So the whole wave of new wealth that we have seen, the immense wealth and the number of billionaires that you're now seeing coming out of India as well over the last few decades, has signaled the age of a new kind of philanthropy, but also began in an age of old power. And therefore, I think the shift towards new power is something that we're all eagerly looking forward to. I think there are three things out of Asha's opening remarks, excuse me, that really stuck with me. One was the democratization of philanthropy. The second was the shift of power from basically from large institutional giving to individuals. And the third, the concept of equity, especially focused on connectedness to community. And I think, therefore, from a philanthropic point of view, a lot of us young philanthropists, in terms of, you know, how long we've been doing this, we've always started with what we've called a theory of change, and we've tried to look for where there could be impact. But I think it's now time to start really developing a theory of philanthropy that is more based on the values of collaboration and trust, partnership, and learning and sharing, much like what we're trying to do today. So my personal experience of having run the foundation for the last 13 years is that there is a lot of eagerness to shift away from what we've seen, even in India, from decades of multilateral involvement in development to a more personal and an Indian brand of philanthropy. And to see how we can make grassroots level change by coming together. And there are a lot more networks now of Indian funders that together want to see how they can actually craft their own way of giving. I think one of the pointers to my remarks today was really based on the question of what have been our own experiences, challenges, accomplishments, etc., as we have tried to move towards this new way of giving. And I would like to believe that Edelgive has been at the forefront of wanting to do things differently, especially not only around flexible funding and listening more to communities and being directed by our grantees rather than directing them. I would also like to confess that there are times when you forget some of the principles, or you unknowingly actually commit the same mistakes that we don't want to commit. And I think one great example of that is in our gender work. In 1992, in India, there was a fairly groundbreaking piece of legislation called the 73rd Amendment that actually made, that provided for a 33% reservation for women in local governments. It was highly celebrated, and there were a lot of foundations who then immediately went to work trying to find these women who could stand for local government elections so that to improve the political involvement of women. And a lot of the metrics that then started coming out was mainly on the number of trainings, and then really looking at the results of elections to see how many women actually won, or how many women actually stood, and therefore how many women actually won. And I think what ended up happening is, because this was a very prescriptive approach, one of the learnings we realized much later was that we hadn't factored in the social frameworks in which these women were being trained or were being equipped to start becoming local leaders. And in India, as in most parts of the world, the influence of patriarchy and also the caste system meant that initially it was actually women who possibly stood for elections, but as proxies for their husbands. And so there was, very soon a sense of disillusionment that all the work that had gone on for, a decade or so hadn't really yielded fruit. But then I think, thankfully, reason set in, and we realized that it was not just enough to look at the metrics and the number of trainings and the way we evaluated, but to see what was the shift. So our focus as philanthropists has always been to see on what is the impact. Rather, in work that involves gender justice or social justice or human rights, you actually have to look at shifts. And if you see about 30 years since that legislation, we've had in 19 out of our approximately 30 states, we now have 50% reservation for women. Increase because they have found success when women have become local leaders. So it's a 30-year journey. And instead of looking for immediate impact, when you start looking at shifts, then the way you do philanthropy also starts changing. The other great shift that has happened is that a lot of the women now stand for themselves. There's enough research that has shown that the work continued and unrelenting focus on getting this done has meant that there are a lot of the women actually stand for themselves, and they are not really proxies for their male members of the family. And finally, I think the research has also shown that when women's representation has gone up, as was foreseen, the focus on the more important issues of education, health, irrigation in the case of rural communities, and many other sort of pressing needs have gotten actually solved in a more consultative as well as in a more sort of peaceful, manner. So I think my sort of submission out of my experience over the last, decade and a half in philanthropy in India is that it is very important for philanthropists also to share. It is very important to also create networks, not only of philanthropists, but also philanthropists and grantees and other nonprofits. And it's important to really sit back and say, what is it that we're really, really trying to do? What is it? How do we achieve shifts rather than immediate, impact? And how do we not let the force of the money that is funding us dictate what we want to see on the ground?
Yeah, done?
Yes, thank you.
Now, 我们非常谢谢 Via 的那个分享啊，那就再一次的，就是说他的这个经验里面呢，又提到一个非常有用的一个这个 power to empower。那我觉得我自己听到一个最重要的一点，就是说在他过去的经验里面呢，如果这个组织的这个 gender 这个性别的这个女性参与的比例可以提升上来的话，那这整个这个 generosity 还有整个这个组织就 empower。那我想这一个研究，其实我在中国在国内这个的案例里面也是有这样子的一个似乎是发现。那其实乐平就是一个很有趣的这样一个基金会。其实，在乐平里面，很多这个女性的这个高阶的这个职员是在负责这个所有的事情上面的。那其实这个跟 Via 刚刚 sharing 的这个，只要这个一个基金会内部的这个结构不再那么的 patriarchy。那就会变成像是一个这样子一个 democratization， 就是一个民主化的 philanthropy。那这整个这个基金会的文化就会有一个 empowering 的文化，是一个非常generating 的 power， 而不是 repressive 的 power。那我想说，这个乐平其实也就是一个也是一个这个现成的例子，可以跟大家讲说，这个一个基金会需要有更多的这个性别的一个这个 gender justice， 还有一个性别的平衡。那我们就现在我们这个 panel 2的最后一个这个 panelist Anna Tony， 然后来请 Anna Tony。Anna 是这个气候与社会研究所的执行主管，然后她也是有非常丰富的经验。她是前福特基金会的驻巴西代表，然后还是那个前绿色和平，是一个那个国际非常著名的环保组织的一个国际董事会的主席。Anna, I will pass to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee. Thanks for the invitation from Wings, and I wanted just to say hello to Janet and Vida. Nice to share this panel with you. Hello from Rio de Janeiro, where I am. And it's a very international meeting here, different time. So very intriguing panel, really intriguing questions. I learned a lot just from thinking about and obviously hearing everybody that just talked before me. So from our perspective, for X is a re-granting foundation. So we are a re-granting foundation, which means that we fundraise with huge foundations outside and inside Brazil. And then obviously we disperse the money for our grantees. And X has something that is very much related to what I understand about power and power relationships. Power is relationships. And as an intermediate foundation, as we are, as intermediate funders, we are within these relationships in relation to powers. But I think it's very important, at least from our perspective, to understand if there is a relationship, power goes back and forward, not only top down, but also bottom up. So the owner of the money has power. Obviously, he or she has a lot of power. The intermediaries, like ourselves, do we have power? Yes, we obviously have power. The grantees that we give money, they have power. Yes, obviously, they also have power. And in the end, the people that are benefiting from these resources has a lot of power. And we learn these up and down powers. So it's not just top down, but also bottom up. So from X perspective, we use our power and we use our power. All of us use our powers in different way. And I totally agree with Janet. We need to be very conscious about the power we have in a sense of not only influencing the grantees, what we are putting money, but we are also influencing the people that gives money. And that should be in our mind, either by Giving Tuesday or a big funder. And I've been in a very privileged situation of being able to influence people with a lot of money, at least in Brazil. And if I'm able to show them a different world that they are used to, because they normally live in a very limited world, they have changed. So I just wanted to really emphasize that power is relationships. And for me, the organizations that we have, our power does not come from just money. our power is much bigger than money. Our power is the contacts that we have, the people that we can make relationships to. So for example, a very concrete example, by sitting where I am, I have contact with people with a lot of money on the top. And I also have contact with very grassroots people and social movements like the landless movement or the Black Lives Matters movement or the women's movement. How I use that, my ability or X ability to link those powers between people with money and people with People's Powers movement is something that it needs to be taken in a really trustful manner and in a very transparent manner. But how we use power is something that guides the work we do all the time. And as I said, not power as just money, but power in terms of relationships, in terms of contacts, power in terms of different knowledge, powers in terms of access to places and people that some people would never have. Neither people from the top, they would never have the ability to get to some movements that we are, or people from movements that I would never be able to talk to big CEOs or big philanthropists. So that relationship is what guides X as an organization. And it's never about the power we have, but which causes that we are, that we have, which values that we have. In our case, X is about, our name says everything, it's climate and society. So how are we changing the same forces, in our view, that are keeping inequality are the forces that are also creating emissions. So we take climate change from the perspective of equality, and we use our power, inverted commas, to make sure that we are linking people, putting resources, making contacts that will change politically the way we work. I wanted to give an example of that type of work that I think is very new in the new philanthropic way of us to work, which is unbranded communication and unbranded advocacy. What I mean by unbranded, I mean, if you have a cause, if we take the logos from the causes that we have and we really just talk about the cause, normally we can take away some power relations if we just talk in the cause. So unbranded communication is, yes, like Giving Tuesday. Doesn't matter who is behind Giving Tuesday. Doesn't matter who are the logos behind that. It just matters that people give. So it's just, it's that type of unbranded way of thinking. And I really like some of the principles that were set up. I would add unbranded, because I think some of the brands, because of fundraising, is quite bad. Other times, having a brand gives you legitimacy. And then you should use your brand because you need that legitimacy. So I think there are different models. I like the gentleman that also mentioned about the new power and old power living together in harmonious ways, because I think we need really different models for those causes. If we think about relationships, we need always to look at how power will play out in one type of relationship versus the other, being very conscious about this power. And in the end of the day, for me, philanthropy is about trust. And it's not a naive trust. It's a trust of the principles and codes. And I think we that are working on philanthropy in whatever scale, either like the person with the big money or an intermediate or the grantee, I would put them all together, all the social movement, we all need to be very conscious about the power that we have. Unfortunately, I think the people that now get the money in the end, especially social movements, they should be much more conscious about the power they have. Without them, there is no philanthropy. There isn't, no, we all know, I think it's easier to fundraise than to find excellent projects, excellent partners. So they have much more power than they imagine. And they should use those powers in challenging philanthropy and the people with the money on how to make change. So I leave you with that, to think about relationships rather than thinking that's just one way. Use those relationships much beyond just money, but contacts and access to bubbles, to knowledges that people would not have. That's the best way of empowering people. Thank you so much.
All right. We got several questions in Chinese, but I would like to know, because due to the limit of time, so I would like to only ask one question to all the three panelists in the panel two. The question is, how, I think it's a very practical question for many grassroots organizations. So the question is, how can grassroots organizations gain access to the grant making organization? That's very practical. So let's see, Jenna, Via, or Anna, who want to give a short response to this question. That's if a grassroots organization, that's how can they access to the global large grant making organization.
I can start.
Yeah.
Just quickly. Obviously, thank you for the question. The person that has asked is obviously asking about money. Now, access to funds, which is really important. I don't want to undertake the importance of it. I would just suggest, as I just mentioned, that grant making is much more than money. So perhaps you should not start with asking the money, but telling about your ideas, tell about your goals, tell about what you want to change. And that will be the best way of approach a grant maker, rather than asking money. Share ideas, share the power that you have, that they don't have.
Okay, thanks Anna for sharing the question. I think that's 有一个点非常重要，就是 grant making 的 process 不是只是钱还有那个资源而已，而是像 Anna 说的，其实是一个整个核心是一个 relationship。那其实像信赖这个只是这个 relationship 的一部分，还包括它怎么样看你这个组织整个你的计划，你怎么样来提升在这个计划里面显现你整个这个的对未来的展望，还有对这个关系的一个想象，这样子，这非常重要。Jenna or Via, do you have any kind of response to this question? That's in your experience, maybe like Jenna, you can share being a grassroots organization. How can you how do you advise the grassroots organization to access the grant making organization? Or Via, being a grant maker.
I hope you asked me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Actually, I was going to say exactly what Anna said. It's to build the relationship is the most important. And so sharing what is this you do. So don't ask for money, but let somebody have faith, grow that relationship. I think that's the best thing. If you share what you do, maybe invite somebody to come and see the work you do. That's the best way. And so don't talk so much about money, but the impact you are making, the difference. And as you grow that relationship, money will just begin to flow. I just quickly remembered when I saw that one time when someone who worked for a bigger grant making organization called me and said, "Oh, Janet, by the way, you've never applied for a grant from us, but we are celebrating 100 years, and we decided to give you $500,000 to do whatever you want, So I had never asked them for money, but they said, you talk about the work you do here and there, you talk about building endowments, just do what you want. And I'd never asked for money. So a relationship is a very powerful thing. It will take you where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. How beautiful the relationship is. Very, the power to empower. 好，那我想我们的时间差不多到了，那我们结尾的时间，那我们还是现在请那个关老师也来，因为关老师作为这个 CSIR 的这个主编，然后来对我们整个现在今天这2个小时的这个 panel 来做一个这个 concluding remark。那关老师还是一样，也请你稍微那个简短一点，因为最后那个 Wins 的这个那个Benjamin 会给一个这个 concluding remark。So 那关老师，
好，我觉得今天这个会议虽然很简短，但是信息量很大，对我本身也是一个有很多的启发。我特别注意到说，当我们讨论一个新的一个权力结构生成的时候，我们第一次看到，就像我刚才可能讲的特别快，是说这个权力结构它并不来自于政治和经济社会结构本身，而是来自政治经济结构在这个社会里留下的那些不完美的地方，就是那些社会的不均衡、不平衡的地方。所以在慈善领域，我们所有的做慈善的工作者，实际上都是在直面这些社会问题，然后是在这些社会问题里不断的利用新的资源来解决新的问题。在这一点上，我觉得这个要从这样的一个视角出发，才能够去理解 New Power 的深刻含义，因为这面对的是世界上的绝大多数人口，而不是少数人。绝大多数人口通过他们新的伙伴关系，借助于新的技术，实际上大家正在集结出来一些新的社会结构。我觉得这个不仅是在解决自己的问题，也在分享。更重要的一种分享是来自知识的分享，就如同我们今天的这个会。其实真正的知识的改进的创新往往是发生在慈善领域，因为在那些非常细微的细小的社会问题上，在这些没有资源的人要解决需要资源解决的问题的方面，我觉得慈善领域都具有着特别重要的意义，知识性的意义。这个意义它不仅仅是一个组织的运行，不仅仅是一个人的新的合作和互助体系的一个搭建，它更重要的是在生产一种新的知识，生产一种新的观念，从而使我们这个社会变得更美好。从这个意义上说，我觉得我是在中国，我是在昆明，所以我觉得有很多东西需要学习。但是在这里我也在想，其实微观上来看啊，就是说其实中国也有很多中国的经验。我觉得今天这个会的组织，我们没有更多的时间来呈现中国的案例啊，就其实中国还是有一些很好的案例正在发生的，比如像水滴筹这样。其实现在真正的参与慈善事业的人，已经不仅仅是有钱人或者中产阶级，普通人也是在构建自己的一个互助系统来参与到这个事业里，因为爱心大家都是有的。那这些年呢，我们可以说在最广泛意义上的慈善事业在中国是非常活跃的，而正是这个活跃的机体也正在解决很多人细致入微的问题。包括这次 COVID-19 出来了以后哈，我今天还看到一个案例哈，就是说这个魔兽世界一个网络游戏，在向我们受灾威胁最大的东北地区，他用他的新方式来做他的慈善。在东北，细节我就不讲了，养那个虚拟的宠物，用这个方式，一个非常有亲和力的一个方式。所以从这个意义上说，我觉得，因为我是站在中国想这个问题的时候讲，其实中国是这个世界上最庞大的慈善事业的一个大基地，人口多，对吧？其实而且我们还有一个特别有意思的问题啊，在我看来，就是说我们的慈善事业的基础，一边是从西方学的，一边是自己内生的。它最大的表现是2016年我们才有了第一部的中国慈善法，我们的环境在不断的改善，但同时呢，底层的创新在不断的增加，而这种增加如何能够在知识体系上纳入到一个世界的 和世界可以对话的讨论里来。我觉得真邦，我觉得这是我们最应该做的事情，是吧？也是今天这个会最大的价值。其他我没有，感谢大家，我也学到了很多啊。谢谢大家。
谢谢关老师。那我跟大家提一下，关老师刚刚说水滴筹，那是一个 crowdfunding platform， 那是其实有非常大的影响力。那其实关老师也不用自谦，这个像乐平，还有像那个 CSSI 也是关老师刚刚说的这个非常新的，而且非常有那个具有前瞻性和非常 innovative 的那个中国新慈善的代表。那我最后就想起那个 Benjamin，we are waiting for you for so long， so it's your time to give a concluding remark。然后 Benjamin 是 Wings 的这个Chief 这个主要执行官，是那个 Executive Director of Worldwide Initiative of Grantmaker Support， 就是说是这个 Wings 的这一切在背后支持我们这个整个活动的。OK， Benjamin， your time. Concluding remark.
Thank you so much. And I first of all, of course, I really apologize for not being able to be there at the opening, but I know that Lauren presented Wings a little bit. I know that some of you think I was asleep, but I promise you I was not. I really had an internet issue, so I took my car, and I'm glad I was able to connect actually still during the first panel, and have the privilege really to listen to such insightful speakers throughout the event. That was extremely, I would say it was an extremely powerful exchange, and also powerful in the sense that it builds the relationships that Anna was talking about. And also because I think and I hope it's empowering all of us to think differently about the philanthropic practice. And I think I would like to make an analogy also about this new power ID and the way our global philanthropic sector looks like. And I think that we very much come from that place of old power in the philanthropy field, not just as we act as philanthropic organizations, but also as we are organized as a collective, as an ecosystem, where you were just mentioning, Chengpeng, that you learn from the West, and I think that there's been a lot of this sort of idea of a center where the expertise is, and then this expertise is being sort of distributed from the top down, and then you may learn from that expertise which has sort of one center. And I think that we now are seeing a shift, and we need to accelerate a shift where the knowledge, the critical thinking, the innovations in philanthropy are not in one center only. They are in one center, but also in other centers. It has to become multipolar and multi-centered and more distributed kind of leadership, also in the philanthropic sector, in terms of how we think philanthropy and how we practice philanthropy. And so we need a more distributed leadership. And I think that it's really interesting also how the COVID-19 crisis made it more obvious that we're all connected at the global level, and that local and global issues are so intricate. And so that really makes us think that we need to strengthen this kind of global discussions where we can bring the perspective from Kenya, from Brazil, from India, from China, from the US, and from other parts of the world, because it's so rich and really giving us, I think, lots of ideas to move forward in the future and to make change differently and hopefully with more impact. And so I think that's why also I see that this series of The World is Our Lab, that we're very proud to partner with the Leping Foundation in this series. We really see it as a first milestone, also as an effort in building a vibrant learning community, because it takes more than one discussion or more than one exchange. It really takes building that articulation, building these networks, and these spaces for collaboration that we said were so much needed today. So I really hope that at Wings, as the global network that brings together the different philanthropic developers, philanthropic catalysts across the globe, we can really help playing that role and making these connections globally, and also including and giving more opportunities for Chinese ecosystem and Chinese players to take their part in that global community. And we have lots to learn also from what is happening here in China. So that was really a delight to be part of that discussion today. And I really very much look forward to the next in the series of The World is Our Lab. And I really want to thank again our amazing speakers and the Leping Foundation and all of you for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Benjamin. Okay, so last word that please, if you have any questions, feel free to contact the either Leping Foundation or CSSIR. You will find the information online, or you can contact Wings. But just don't send the mail directly to Benjamin or or his personal email. So that's also that's want to remind our audience. 我们再提醒一下各位参与者，就是说我们之后还有一系列这个 The World is Our Lab， 这个世界是我们的这个。是以世界为度，或是以世界为这个实验室的这个 Webinar Series， 还包括这个所有的，如果你是学生的话，或是你是研究者的话，也欢迎加入我们现在已经在准备中，在建立中的这个这个东亚洲这个社会创新这个学者网络。那我们希望能够，就像我们今天这个 Panel 2讲的一样，我们创建的 Power 是一个。relationship 的概念是一个关系的概念，这个 power 是可以 empower 所有在这个 community 里面的人都能够去 collaborate 去 share information， 然后去一起把这个慈善能够把人类社会能够带到一个更好的地步。好，那这个就是我们的 last question， 还有 my last comment， 然后就是说今天这个是我这个第一次主持这个 webinar series， 然后希望没有那个表现太糟糕。那希望大家都能够满意。好，那我们就下次再见，拜拜。Oh, anyone? Okay, so.